Yes, I can.
Okay, great. We'll go quickly. There's actually, I think, a little bit of overlap with the presentation we just saw, except we were dealing with mostly high school students. So to give you an idea of what we were trying to do is, if I can move here. Um, I'm from Minnesota State University at Mankato. And Minnesota actually, although it's very good at education, it has one of the worst computer science uh, courses of all the 50 states. So in high school, we just don't have a lot of computing uh, courses, and we don't have a really good way to move teachers through into the computer teaching field, I guess. So we're actually rated 50 out of 50 states. So that's sort of why we were starting on this project. And if you can see this slide here, you can see that actually it's even worse for people of color. So we have a fairly vibrant community here on campus of people of color. We have lots of people from all over the world. However, we don't have a lot of domestic people of color, and that's sort of the problem that we were trying to address. Because even though in my own courses, when I'm teaching programming at the university, uh, more than half of my students might be people of color. They're just not domestic students. They're from all over the world. And you can see here, this is from the Minnesota Department of Education, that we're just not really reaching the younger students. And it's just a weakness Minnesota has. I think it's partly because we're so rural in many parts of the state. And you can see that we have problems. Our overall STEM workforce, uh, we have a fair number of people in the Hispanic and Black community are in the STEM workforce, but it turns out most of them are not in the STEM workforce that requires a high degree. So, for example, they might be working installing networking or cable companies or things like that. They don't necessarily need to have a bachelor's degree for some of the work they're doing. So it's these numbers here probably um, downplay the problem. We actually have a very severe problem getting people of color into the higher level of STEM uh, areas. So to give you an idea, it's only, I would say, a handful of my students are domestic people of color the at Minnesota State. So it's a severe problem we find not only in the uh, primary education, but also when they get up to the upper levels. And before I go on, I just want to mention the team because we've been working on this for a while, and Doctors Rajiv Bukralia and Dr. Charisse Truesdale have been our leaders. And I just wanted to mention that. I am one of the curricula design people, and our instructors are Shumak and Shurov, so we'll get into that in a second. And our community partner was the Urban League for this particular project. So this is what we were trying to do. We were trying to get young people, especially people of color, interested in STEM. And sort of the design of this was going to be project-based learning, culturally responsive pedagogy, where they could develop projects that perhaps would involve their own communities. That's the service learning piece. We were and are going forward trying to develop mentorship. So we're trying to find community leaders who can meet with these young students and encourage them. And what we're trying to do is make STEM projects in the classroom that get the kids excited. So that's really what we're trying to do. Get the students excited, show them cool technology, show them VR, AR, XR, programming. Some of the other things that we are trying to do for next time will be some engineering, some mathematical thinking. So this is what we're trying to do. And here's our concept. I'll just really quickly go over that. The important part here is at the top is we're trying to find community partners, whether it's other colleges or the Urban League in our case, or other schools where we can identify students who are interested in STEM. One key thing that we didn't know at the time or we knew about it, but we didn't know how important it was going to be, is the parents. So identifying the students is part of the problem, but we also have to find students who have parents who are willing to work with us, which is a key thing that we found out here. So again, trying to find industry experts and other mentors, community mentors to help build skills and get the students interested in STEM. And the long-term goal, although we were just the pilot project, but the long-term goal that we have is that these students would be able to earn a little bit of college credit so that they could see that they could do college level work. And that is sort of one of the things that we're trying to do to build enthusiasm. So we did start the launch, and it happened this past summer. We were working with Urban League again, and the students were, for the most part, high school students. The things that we found out, and I think some of these you probably know, is the IRB is very important. Dealing with human subjects is extremely important. But the part we didn't probably emphasize enough, because we just didn't know, is the parents are a huge block. So if you want to work with these communities, you really need to get to the parents very early on, because if you want to do research and you want to develop data and so forth, you need to get their permission really early, or else you just won't get it. So that was a key thing that we discovered during the pilot. As far as the curriculum is concerned, we developed based on a entry-level computer science course, but it's very, very entry level. So for example, like anyone from the college could take it. It's not required that you have past experience or even rudimentary computer skills. It's actually meant to get people excited about computer science. So we chose a course that had a little bit of programming in it. Our partner, Urban League, they were an important part of this. And if you're going to do this kind of thing, you really need to identify a partner. We found a big obstacle was that they need this, some rudimentary equipment, like whiteboards, computers, projectors. These are things that, we take for granted in the college level. But when you're going out into the community and you're looking for places to work with these kind of children, you don't often have a place that has the whiteboards and the up-to-date computers, especially in the inner city. And that's where we were. So we were in the Twin Cities, and it was pretty rough to get things going there. Working with your partner is a huge part of this piece. One thing we found out after, and we knew this from the beginning, finding the right students, and that's one thing our partner helped us with. So the Urban League was very good at identifying students. But again, it's not just the students. You also have to have parents who are very interested in working with you. And finally, and this is probably something that you also might be facing is finding the right teachers. So these communities, they are, well, they're people of color. And so someone like myself is not necessarily the right person to teach them. So we had to actually find people who could teach programming who were people of color, and that was really hard. Um, a lot of them who could do it were otherwise busy, and we didn't have, we just didn't have available in our faculty anyone who was a domestic person of color who could teach programming. It was quite an experience to try to find people to teach. But again, this is sort of what went out. So the Urban League went out and put up this advertisement, and you can see there on the computers they have Minecraft. So one of the key factors that we found was we needed to have some kind of technology that the students wanted to use. So we were teaching programming using Minecraft, and yeah, it turned out to be a very good choice for us, and we'll discuss that in a bit. So we were teaching Lua, the programming language, which is used in a lot of games. It wasn't necessarily a choice that we would have made if we were just teaching a college class. We don't teach Lua to our entry-level freshmen. We teach Python, and we probably would have preferred Python. We would have had more people available to teach for us. However, Lua is an easier language to use, and it's also used in Minecraft. So that's why we did it. And the course that we put them on was for 5 weeks, 4 hours a day in class, but it actually went a few more hours longer than that every day. So just for the launch, this is before we taught. I think that you can read it yourselves, but the most important parts I think was working with the community partner, um, getting parents involved would be really key if we were to do this again. And this last point, engage with the community and industry mentors would be really important. So we did launch, and things were, I think, a lot of what Inna was saying in the past proposal is what we found as well. A lot of the things that she mentioned, we also had. So this one thing that she probably didn't have is that we found out that you really need to have an orientation session. And we'd probably include the parents if now knowing what we know. So developing a code of conduct, this is a really surprising thing for us. We weren't expecting this at all. But it turned out that the key finding or key surprise that we had was actually that teaching the technology was easy. That was the easy part. It was the students really didn't know how to behave in the classroom, or perhaps they didn't want to behave in the beginning. So sitting them down, having a discussion, talking about what is allowed and what's not allowed was a critical element that we actually had to go back and do. Because when we first started the course, we just assumed the students would be more like college students and sit down and we could introduce ourselves and so forth. But actually, we had to go back and develop a code of conduct. Oh, sorry, wrong way. A really important part of this, and this goes, I think, speaks to the culturally sensitive pedagogy, was we had to build a sense of community. So these students don't necessarily think of themselves as college students, and they don't necessarily think that the instructors are there, are part of their community. So our teachers had to, sit with them, have lunch with them, uh, build a personal relationship with them, ask them what they wanted to do with their lives, and uh, really interact with them almost as friends, really trying to build a relationship in order to be able to teach them. Because until then, uh, it was a lot harder. There were a lot more disciplinary problems until our Shoto and Shamak were able to sit with them and talk to them. Every day, they would have team building exercises. This was, again, part of building the community. Working together was not something that they were used to, simply because they didn't actually know each other. These students were not necessarily from the same school. So it was helpful to get them to work together by having morning activities. But they also would get breakfast together and have lunch together, so that also helped. And this is a huge part of what we found, that unlike college students, which we're used to, you needed to break a lot. So I would say we had 100 hours total instruction, and less than half was actually spent on the technology, on teaching the technology. A lot more was on the social aspects, on having breaks, talking with them, having maybe other activities, having speakers, maybe going someplace. They actually learned how to code. They learned programming relatively quickly. They were able to learn loops and if statements and how to make variables relatively easily. However, they needed a lot of breaks. We were able to use Minecraft, and we also had in our back pocket some VR activities and some AR activities. So the students wanted to learn it. So that really helped. Although even I would say that it was learning the material was actually relatively easy for them, but it was because they wanted to learn the material, and Minecraft is just very engaging. So they would help each other. They explored together. They built a world together. We had a centralized server where the world was, so they could all engage in the same world together. And on the prior presentation with Inna, she mentioned how the students enjoyed working together. And I think in this case too, the students being able to engage in the same world was really helpful to their education. The part of that was peer learning. They would help each other. And if someone didn't quite understand how to make a loop work or an if statement or so forth, they were able to just sit together and show each other how to make things work, which was much more like a Montessori type situation, which was what we were going for. We were going for that kind of peer learning. And it turned out to be quite a good learning experience. There were different groups in the class. The students would sit with different people, and each group would make their own village, I guess, in Minecraft, or make their own houses and so forth. So they did enjoy a competitive environment. Only a few more things to say, I guess. One of the key things we found, and I think we knew this, is you need to develop enthusiasm for STEM for these students, because they're not necessarily seeing themselves as going to be STEM college students. I think at the beginning, especially, some of the better students did not see themselves going to college. So sitting them down, taking them to the science museum, taking them to our campus. So we're about 70 or 80 miles away from where the Urban League is located. So having them come down and try some VR and seeing some of the engineering places was really helpful to get them inspired, and you could see their excitement when they came down. Um, but as you can see from this quote from our instructor, uh, it would have been better had we done this earlier. We did this at the end of the 5 weeks instead of the beginning of the 5 weeks, and it would have been better had we encouraged them earlier. And then a lot, like I have mentioned a few times, it was really helpful. The instructors found to actually sit with the students and talk about just college life in general, because they really don't have a family member or a parent. Well, most of them anyway did not have um, parents or siblings who were going to college, so they didn't really know what it was about. Um, we had a lot of first generation students, and they just, yeah, they didn't know what to expect, and they didn't. It's not that they couldn't do the work; they certainly could. They were doing very well on the actual math and programming and so forth. But what they just didn't see themselves as college students, and so coming down to campus was really helpful. Oh, and so just the lessons we learned during our pilot project was do a lot of the social things. We thought actually that we would have more problems teaching them to code. Actually, that turned out to be the least troublesome issue. It was far more far more important to develop the social aspects of our um, group and our teaching, and being enthusiastic and just talking to them as people and saying you can go to college, this will be great, it's a good life to choose. They did seem to respond to that. And yeah, so that was, I just would highlight that was the surprise we had. The technology was not hard to teach, they were fine with it, um, but the social aspects were the big part. Now, where we're going from here is this was a pilot project. We got a small grant to run this, but we're actually trying for an NSF grant, which would be, of course, much larger. And we're expanding to a couple more colleges in the Twin City area and working with a few more community partners. So this was really a pilot project, and our data will be forthcoming when we start our next stage. But anyway, that's my project. This is what we did. And yeah, I would say plan on, if you're going to work with this community, plan on helping them socially, and also getting the parents involved early. Everything else was pretty straightforward. So thank you for listening, and any questions?